Hello and welcome back. Join us as we take you on another enchanting walk through the timeless streets of Rome. Today we'll take you on a journey to Trastevere, the heart of Rome on the other side of the Tiber. Let's dive in. Trastevere, whose name comes from the Latin phrase trans Tiberim, meaning beyond the Tiber, is now Rome's 13th district, spanning just under 2 square kilometers. This area is considered one of the oldest parts of Rome, having been incorporated into the city towards the end of the Republic period, around the 1st century BCE. Trastevere is a neighborhood full of unique character, teeming with cozy restaurants, quiet cafes, and lively bars that attract both locals and tourists alike. To cross to the other side of the Tiber, we'll take the Palatine Bridge. But before we do, we'll pause for a moment as it starts, where you can enjoy a fantastic view of the Ponce Emilius, also known as the Ponte Rotto or Broken Bridge. It was the first stone bridge in Rome and the second most important. Its construction likely began around 179 BCE during the censorship of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. The Pons Aemilius once connected the cattle market on the eastern side of the Tiber to Trastevere. Unfortunately, its diagonal alignment to the river's current caused frequent damage during floods, leading to repeated reconstructions. In 1557, a massive flood caused the bridge to collapse, but it was rebuilt thanks to the Pope Gregory XIII. His family crest, featuring a dragon, can still be seen above the arches, commemorating the restoration. Unfortunately, more floods in the same century, in 1575 and 1598, once again destroyed the eastern part of the bridge. This time it was decided to abandon its reconstruction for several hundred years. In 1853, Pope Pius IX connected the remaining parts of the bridge to the mainland with an iron walkway, but it too proved to be short-lived. Finally, in 1887, the decision was made to build the new Palatine Bridge, which now allows us to cross over the Trastevere. The medieval architecture of Trastevere consisted of small houses and defensive towers. Narrow, dark alleys were often lit only by candles burning in front of shrines, mounted on building facades. Old Trastevere hides numerous treasures, including one of the oldest Jewish synagogues in Rome, dating back to the 11th century. Its walls once housed Jewish manuscripts, which unfortunately were destroyed in the Great Fire of 1268. Today, the former synagogue building serves as a residential space. Moving further, we arrived at the monastery and basilica of Santa Cecilia, one of the most important places for Catholics in Rome. It is reached through a medieval courtyard with a fountain resembling a stone amphora, symbolizing the early Christian baptismal font. This location once housed the ancient villa of Saint Valerian, the husband of Saint Cecilia. On either side of the garden are monasteries, to the right belonging to the Franciscans, and to the left to the Benedictines. The basilica, preceded by portico with ancient columns, medieval decorations and tombstones, holds the tragic story of Saint Cecilia, who was born in Trastevere in the 3rd century. Cecilia was a Christian during a time of persecution. Married off against her will, she converted her husband and his brother, both of whom sacrificed their lives for their faith. Cecilia herself was also sentenced to death, but miraculously resisted it for a long time. She survived being locked in a steam room for several days. When this failed, an attempt was made to cut off her head, but the axe only wounded her terribly, condemning her to martyrdom for the next days, during which she converted many to Christianity. In the year 225, her body was buried by Pope Urban in a cypress coffin and a dress adorned with gold. Initially hidden in the catacombs of St. Calixtus, her remains were transferred in 822 to the basilica built on the ruins of her home. In 1599, during restoration work, a sarcophagus containing the intact body of Saint Cecilia was discovered. The scene was immortalized by the sculptor Stefano Maderno, summoned by the titular cardinal of the basilica, Paolo Emilius Fondratti. The sculpture, depicting Cecilia lying as if in sleep, but with 3 marks from an axe on her neck, is now displayed in a glass case beneath Arnolfo di Cambio's ciborium, which shelters the main altar. A marble slab on the floor in front of the case bears Maderno's sworn declaration that he sketched the body exactly as he saw it when the tomb was opened in 1599. Saint Cecilia is also the patron saint of musicians, organists, and choristers. She is closely associated with the National Academy of Saint Cecilia, one of the oldest musical institutions in the world. Visitors to the basilica can often hear breathtaking music resonating through the space. It is also worth entering the 16th century choir from which nuns participated in masses. Pietro Cavallini's fresco, The Last Judgment, can be found there. Continuing through the streets of Trastevere, we encounter another fascinating church, Santa Maria dell'Orto. Built in the 16th century, it stands on the site of a former vegetable garden, where in 1488 a miracle occurred. A sick farmer was healed after praying before an image of Mary. Initially, the faithful erected a small chapel in 1492, and in 1495 construction of the current church began. The basilica's design was crafted by Guidetto Guidetti, one of Michelangelo's most prominent students. Inside, the church is adorned with rich gilding and stuccos from the 18th century. Santa Maria dell'Orto is dedicated to Our Lady of the Garden and serves as the Japanese national church in Rome. The next stop on our walk through Trastevere is the Church of San Francesco a Ripa. Founded in the 11th century as a hospital church dedicated to Saint Blaise, it was later rebuilt and rededicated to Saint Francis of Assisi. The saint is said to have stayed at the adjacent hospice in 1209 and again in 1223 during visits to popes Innocent III and Honorius III. Inside the church, in the last chapel on the left side of the altar, stands a magnificent statue of Blessed Ludovica Albertoni, created by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Completed when the artist was 76 years old, this is one of Bernini's most mature works. The statue was commissioned by Cardinal Angelo Paluzzi and his nephew, Pope Clement X, to mark the restoration of the family chapel. Bernini ingeniously designed the lighting to illuminate the statue from two hidden side windows, enhancing its dramatic effect, similar to his work on the Ecstasy of St. Teresa in the Church of Santa Maria della Vittoria. The painting above the statue, Saint Anne and the Madonna, was created by Bernini's protege, Giovanni Battista Gauli. Before leaving the church, don't miss the Chapel of the Immaculate Conception at the very end. On its back wall, a small door leads to a room where the master of metaphysical painting, Giorgio de Chirico, rests. The room also houses three of his works: Self-Portrait, Woman in a Veil, and The Fall of Christ Under the Cross. These paintings were donated by the artist's wife. Let's continue along San Francesco a Ripa Street, where we come across a Baroque church with a white and yellow facade. This is the Church of the 40 Martyrs of Sebaste, also known as the Church of Saint Pascal Bailon. The 40 Martyrs were Roman legionaries from the 12th Legion Fulminata, who were Christians and refused to renounce their faith. They suffered a martyr's death, forced to stand naked on the frozen surface of a lake. Their bodies were later burned near Sebaste in Armenia. The first church on this site was built during the Middle Ages by Pope Calixtus II. The second patron of the church is Saint Pascal Bailon, a Spanish friar canonized in 1690. He was widely regarded as a protector of women, both unmarried women and those seeking help in difficult marriages. On December 23, 1738, by decree of King Philip V, the church came under the patronage of the Spanish crown, becoming the national church of Spaniards in Rome. The next part of our walking route will be a bit more challenging, as we'll be climbing the Roman hill, Janiculum. While it's not a difficult walk, it is incredibly scenic. On the way to the top, we'll stop at several interesting points, making the hike less tiring. The first stop is the Church of San Pietro in Montorio. It was built on the site of an older church dedicated to St. Peter and serves as a sanctuary commemorating the supposed location of the apostles' crucifixion. You've likely heard of the dogma stating that St. Peter suffered martyrdom in the arena of the Vatican Hippodrome. However, later accounts and the common Roman practice of crucifying criminals in highly visible locations, similar to Golgotha in Jerusalem, led to the revival of an early medieval belief that the apostle died on Janiculum Hill. As a result, in the early 9th century, a monastery and a church were built on this site. In the 15th century, the ruins of the church were rebuilt thanks to the generous support of the Catholic monarchs of Spain, Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. In 1500, the church was consecrated by Pope Alexander VI. The interior houses many valuable works of art from the 16th and 17th centuries. Until 1797, the altar was adorned by Raphael's Transfiguration, which can now be admired in the Vatican Pinacoteca. Nevertheless, the church remains a magnificent art museum with exceptional chapels. One example is the stunning Raimondi Chapel from 1640, designed by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. This was Bernini's first family chapel. Here you can see members of the Raimondi family, Francesco and Girolamo, immortalized in marble, appearing as if they are leaning over balconies, supported by ornately decorated sarcophagi. The chapel's central sculpture is St. Francis in Ecstasy, a masterpiece by Francesco Baratta, Bernini's pupil. Another highlight is the Cappella del Monte, designed by Giorgio Vasari. It features Vasari's painting The Conversion of St. Paul, as well as the tombs of Pope Julius III's uncle and grandfather, created by Michelangelo's students and collaborators. On the opposite side of the street, at the same level as the church, lies the Garibaldi Mausoleum Ossuary, a collective grave that holds the remains of those who fell in the battles for Rome between 1849 and 1870. The site commemorates the final fierce defense of the Roman Republic, proclaimed on February 9, 1849. We continue our climb to reach the great fountain, Fontana dell'Acqua Paola, named after Pope Paul V Borghese, under whose pontificate it was constructed. The Pope commissioned its construction to provide clean drinking water to the residents of Janiculum Hill, while also restoring the ruined Aqua Traiana aqueduct from the Roman Empire. The fountain was designed by Giovanni Fontana and Flaminio Ponzio. White marble from the nearby ruins of the Roman Temple of Minerva was used for its construction. At the top of the fountain are the papal tiara and keys, above which sits the Borghese family coat of arms, featuring an eagle and a dragon supported by angels. The central theme of the fountain is water, which flows through 5 streams beneath its arches, into 5 marble basins. The Fontana dell'Acqua Paola later became the inspiration for the famous Trevi fountain. Finally, we reached the very top of Janiculum Hill, the highest hill in Rome. It is a place of worship dedicated to the god Janus, which offers a picturesque view of Rome. In the center of the square stands the majestic statue of Giuseppe Garibaldi, unveiled in 1895 to commemorate the struggle for independence that took place here in the 19th century. From the hill, there is a spectacular view of Rome, and from the other side, the Vatican is also visible. Below the viewing terrace, there is a platform where a cannon is fired every day at noon. On Janiculum Hill, you can also see numerous busts dedicated to people who were directly or indirectly involved in the fight for independence. A bit further, on the opposite side, stands the equestrian statue of Anita Garibaldi, the wife of Giuseppe Garibaldi. The sculpture depicts Anita during her escape from a Brazilian camp, holding a child in one arm and a pistol in the other. It also serves as a mausoleum, with an urn with her ashes placed in a pedestal. A short distance away rises the Janiculum Lighthouse, 20 meters high and built from white stone. It is often referred to as the Argentine Lighthouse because it was commissioned by Italian immigrants living in Argentina. Let's continue, this time winding our way down the serpentine paths. Once we descend, we head right toward Villa Farnesina. Villa Farnesina is one of the most beautiful examples of Roman Renaissance architecture. It was commissioned by Agostino Chigi, a Sienese banker to Pope Julius II, and built between 1506 and 1510. Chigi was an art enthusiast, known for hosting gatherings of artists and cultural figures in his villa. He was also famous for his lavish dinners, during which guests dined on gold tableware and then threw the plates directly into the Tiber. However, the host had thought of everything. He had nets placed at the bottom of the river to recover the valuable dishes. The villa's architect was Baldassare Peruzzi, a pupil of Bramante, and its interiors were adorned with works by masters such as Raphael, Sebastiano del Piombo, and Giulio Romano. In 1577, the villa passed into the hands of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, the grandson of Pope Paul III. In later years, it belonged to the Bourbons of Naples, and in 1861 it became the residence of the ambassador of the Duchy of Parma and poet Salvador Bermudez de Castro. Since 1927, the villa has been owned by the Italian state and houses a museum. It would be fantastic if you could visit Villa Farnesina. In the meantime, let's continue our walk. Ahead of us is Porta Settimiana, a defensive gate resembling a triumphal arch. This is a very old city gate, incorporated into the city walls by Emperor Aurelian. Its name derives from Emperor Septimius Severus, during whose reign it served as the entrance to public baths. A bit further is an old church, first mentioned as early as the 12th century. It is the Church of Saint Dorothy, dedicated to the Virgin and Martyr from Caesarea. Beyond the church, at the end of the street, lived Margherita Lutti, Raphael Santi's lover, and possibly his secret wife, the famous Fornarina. Walking along Via della Scala, we reach another charming square in Trastevere, home to the Church of Our Lady of the Steps. Its name originates from a sacred image of Mary, once placed under the stairs of a house. According to legend, a washerwoman prayed before the image for her child's healing, and her prayers were answered. The church was built at the beginning of the 17th century, at the initiative of Pope Clement VII, and entrusted to the Discalced Carmelites. Its interior is rich and baroque, with abundant gilding. Beautiful, large crystal chandeliers with gilded candelabras immediately catch the eye. In the left side nave is the miraculous image of Our Lady of the Steps, which inspired the construction of the church. The church is also famous for the rejection of a painting commissioned from Caravaggio. According to the sources, the artist used a prostitute as a model, and the image of Mary seemed frail and tired. The Carmelites considered this work unworthy and too impoverishing. Fortunately, the rejected painting was bought out and can now be admired in the Louvre. To the left of the church's exit is one of Rome's oldest pharmacies, still in operation today. In the 17th century, it was run by monks from the monastery, who prepared medicines and remedies for the papal court, using herbs from their garden. Let's take a stroll to Piazza Sant'Egidio, named after Saint Giles, who in the 5th century abandoned all his possessions to live serving the poor and God. In front of the church, there is a sculpture depicting a homeless man sleeping on a bench. The building next to the church once housed the monastery of St. Giles, and today it is home to the Museum of Rome in Trastevere. We'll end our walk today at the square that serves as the heart of Trastevere's life, Piazza di Santa Maria in Trastevere. At the center of the square stands one of the oldest preserved fountains, moved to this prominent location in 1658 by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. At the far end of the square rises the Basilica of Santa Maria in Trastevere, one of the most fascinating churches in Trastevere. It is the first church dedicated to Virgin Mary and one of the oldest Christian worship sites in Rome. The church was built during the pontificate of Pope Calixtus I in the first half of the 3rd century. Pope Calixtus persuaded Emperor Alexander Severus to turn an old tavern located next to a veteran's house into a place of prayer. According to legend, in 38 BCE, oil sprang from the ground here, flowing across the district to the Tiber. This was seen as a sign foretelling the birth of the Savior, and the site was called the Fountain of Oil or Spring of Olive Oil. The first sacred building was erected after the persecution of Christians ended, in the mid-4th century during the pontificate of Pope Julius I. At that time, the church also received the relics of Saint Calixtus, who was martyred. The church's facade is preceded by a later portico designed by Carlo Fontana in 1702. Above it, a 13th century mosaic depicting the Virgin Mary nursing the child has been preserved. On either side of her stand women with oil lamps, symbolizing the biblical wise and foolish virgins. Another mosaic featuring the Madonna is located on the top of the 4-story Romanesque bell tower. On the columns stand statues of Saint Calixtus, Cornelius, Julius, and Calepodius. The basilica's three-aisled interior is stunningly beautiful. Its Renaissance coffered ceiling, gilded and decorated with Domenichino's Assumption, is remarkable. The monolithic granite columns come from the baths of Caracalla and the Temple of Isis, which is why they are distinctly varied. The magnificent cosmatex floor, resembling a patterned carpet, was crafted by the Cosmati family, renowned Italian stonemasons. The Basilica of Santa Maria in Trastevere holds special significance for Poles. It was the titular church of Cardinals Wyszyński and Glemp, and above all of Cardinal Stanisław Hozjusz, the 16th century Bishop of Warmia and Papal Legate of the Council of Trent. Trastevere is a place where history and tradition meet the unique atmosphere of local life. Strolling through its streets, you can feel the true soul of Rome, full of authenticity and charm. Thank you for joining us on this walk. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and see you in the next video.